welcome to the participants and welcome to the coaches who are going to watch this video. Today we have Lydia Andrews presenting her coaching model. And as I was saying before, I'm not telling much about that, but I'm very excited to see this presentation, to go through this presentation together because it is very eye-opening, and I think the work that Lydia is going to present is going to be something interesting for all coaches at all stages, ACC, PCC, MCC, something to reflect on. So Lydia, I'm not telling anything else, just share the screen and the space is for you.
Okay, thank you, Christina. There we go. So my coaching model is called the Takeoff Framework. So Eva, you're a bit newer, but Luce was here when I first joined. And in my first 3 months, I traveled so much. So I do enjoy traveling. And what I realized is that over the years, growing up, I lived in Canada. I didn't really go anywhere at all. But from the age of 18, 19, I started traveling. And before you knew it, I visited, over 30 countries, not the life that I expected. But I can say without a doubt that traveling so much has expanded my perspective, has expanded my worldview, the way I think, and also has exposed me to a world of possibilities I didn't know existed, and obviously meeting new people for that same reason. Traveling transformed my life, and I'm using this framework as a way to make a connection between traveling or being in a plane. I won't give you the context yet, you'll see in a second, but being on a plane or any form of transportation, to be honest, and because you're able to navigate uncertainties, stretch your worldview, and rethink comfort. And coaching mirrors travel in so many ways because you're dealing with uncertainty, right? You're dealing with expansion and you're crossing into a new terrain, whether you're the coach or whether you're the client. There is some structure, which is great, but within that structure, there's so much fluidity that you don't know where things are going. And so I want to talk to you today about the Takeoff Framework, which explains a bit more. I'm not going to tell you just yet, but it explains a bit more about how I've connected being a passenger, flying a plane, and coaching, the coaching method. So to start off, when you're going on a journey, you're not going just anywhere. You're going somewhere specific, right? Because you have to have a measurable outcome. And that's exactly the same here. You don't get on a plane without knowing where you're going. Transformation starts because the client has decided there's a goal they want to achieve or a destination they want to reach. And together, the client is working with me as the coach to help him get there. They don't have to have it all figured out because that's exactly why they want coaching in the first place. They know where they want to go, but they don't exactly know how to get there. And working together, get to that specific destination. And why is it a specific destination? Because you can't say, I'm going to Asia when you get on a plane. You're saying, I'm going to Abu Dhabi, or you're going to a specific city somewhere. So let's talk a bit more about what it means to be in the cockpit. So imagine you're 5 years old, you're back to being five, and the the pilot has asked you to join him in the cockpit. So the question for you is, how would you feel if the pilot invited you into the cockpit?
A great way to reflect on how would we feel.
Yeah, imagine it for a second. Imagine you're on the plane and you're little you, right? 5-year-old you. The pilot has said, "Oh, come join me up front." How would you feel?
That would be amazing for me. Threatening, but amazing at the same time.
Okay.
Excited and terrified.
Excited and terrified and amazing. So you may imagine transferring that into how we approach coaching. If every time a client says, I would like to work with you, this is an invitation for you as a coach, for me as a coach, to join them on their journey. And imagine having that same excitement, that same, amazement, that same kind of respect and appreciation for the fact that you've been invited on this journey. Think about how that might impact the way you view coaching, because coaching should be exciting, because it's an exciting opportunity for us as a coach to observe with curiosity and excitement. You're just sitting there and you're observing. So let's talk about this a bit more deeply. I want to explore the pilot and passenger relationship. So this relationship will help us understand the relationship between the client and the coach. And it will also help us understand what the journey looks like. So let's start with one more question. Now think about yourself as a coach. How would you respond if the pilot invited you to join him on the journey? Or think about it in terms of being asked to join someone to partner with them on their journey. How would you feel now?
Eva, what would you say?
For me, it would be exciting because he invited me for the first time, and it was safety for me. So I really want to explore more of the journey. That's why it would be exciting for me.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Exciting to be having been invited on that journey. Yeah. And Luce, love to hear your thoughts.
Also curious because, you know, I would only, let's say, explore or structure my journey, let's say, one way, and partnering with someone else, there is a lot of unexpected things and a lot of things that, that come up that are, the result of a partnership and not just doing things alone. So that aspect is fundamental and so exciting for me.
And Lydia, if I may add, I would feel honored and grateful because, it is an invitation. Um, it's not granted and it is a gift. So I would feel honored.
That's the exact word I would use as well. But I also like the fact that you said it's a gift. So it's not something we should take for granted or even something we should take lightly. It's a big deal for someone to invite you into the world in any kind of capacity, but especially when you think about it in terms of the client and coaching relationship and the partnership there. So what is the role of a coach and what is the role of the client? So in this case, the pilot, of course, is the client and the passenger is the coach. So now in the next few slides, I'll explain what that relationship is like before I tackle the journey specifically. So as a coach, it's my responsibility to ensure that I explain our roles clearly, that the client understands what their role is and what my role is. So there's no confusion, so we're on the same page as we build this relationship. Okay, so as the pilot, I'm reinforcing their autonomy in directing and navigating their own transformation. And as the passenger, I'm supporting them. I'm supporting them on their journey by acknowledging, by responding and observing with curiosity. And I'm in no way taking control, right? The same way on a flight, if I'm on the cockpit, I would never take control. I would never do the same in real life in the coaching relationship as well. This shared understanding promotes trust, clarity, and a partnership rooted in mutual respect from the very beginning. I don't know about you, but I've seen, prior to working through my PCC qualifications, when there isn't a clear understanding of what coaching is, then expectations maybe are unmet only because there wasn't a clear foundation set. All right, so understanding that relationship is extremely important from the very beginning. So So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to use this metaphor to explain the roles and values that exist in the coaching relationship. So starting with partnership. Now, as you know, the partner is the one who sets the route and flies the plane. As the passenger, I sit, I observe, I acknowledge their unique talents, their decisions, and their capabilities. I challenge any assumptions they might have, and then offer questions for them to explore a new perspective. I have to stress here, this partnership is one where, as the passenger, I'm only observing, okay? I'm not, in no way am I the co-pilot. That's why I'm dressed as I am in normal everyday clothes. I'm not taking control at all. And as I ask thoughtful questions, as I observe, it's focusing primarily on the client's greatness, right? So looking at the client's greatness, it's acknowledging that the pilot has skills and has the power to fly, even when they might forget their skills. As the passenger, I can ask questions that will help them remember what they already know, okay? It's about trusting who the client is and trusting the knowledge they have, but also trusting who the client is becoming and their potential. So imagine in a situation where the client forgets what they need to do, or the pilot forgets what they need to do. And as the passenger, I try to take control or I try to offer suggestions. That plane is going to come crashing down. We don't want that. That would be a huge disaster. And that's the same in real life and coaching, because it might be tempting to offer suggestions, to give perspectives, but that's not the role of the coach here. The only time we offer any kind of observation is only to respond back or to mirror what the client has already shared. Next, let's look at clear goals. Of course, the pilot needs to have a clear flight plan and a clear destination. The same way a client needs to know where they're going. So in the beginning of the coaching session, or even in, if it's a series of sessions, you ask the client what their goal is. What would they like to achieve in the session? In the same way, the pilot here knows exactly where they're going and they know what the flight plan is. So in this case, as the passenger, I'm holding space for the client to reflect on where they're headed, why it matters, and who they're becoming as they move towards it. Okay? So that's what's happening on the journey. It's an evolution. But with the clear goals, they're rooted in the client's values, in their beliefs, in their identity, and in the vision of who they're becoming. Because remember, it's not so much about the goal, but it's about the person the client needs to become in order to achieve those goals. And it's not the passenger's responsibility, it's not my responsibility to create the goals for the client. The passenger only sits with curiosity and asks questions about the goals that the client has already shared. And the reason that is because the passenger has to trust the client. The pilot or the client is learning to trust their instinct and their decision-making through practice, by voicing their opinions, by reflecting out loud, by sharing their experiences. Then we get to see their wisdom in action. So things come up that they don't even realize are within them. And here, as the passenger or as the coach, I'm creating a safe space and a respectful place for the client to reflect. I'm listening without judgment. I'm acknowledging the client's unique strengths, their instincts, their beliefs, and their growth. And as I do this, I'm just sitting, I want to say quietly, but yes, quietly. I'm not that I'm not talking at all, but in the sense that I'm present, I'm paying attention, I'm watching, I'm listening, and observing. So the next one here is presence. So looking specifically at presence, it's not about, meditation or anything like that. In this case, presence is all about being focused. I'm not distracted. I'm focusing on my client. I'm focusing on what my client's saying, focusing on what my client's not saying in between the lines, paying attention to intonations, body language, as they express their emotions, any decisions that are made or insights. And I ask questions about that. So I'm present, I'm observing, using my senses to see what more could I ask regarding what the client is saying and what they're not saying. Remember, the focus is simply just on asking questions, but by being present and asking questions. So it's not just that I'm a passenger. I'm a passenger with a purpose. And my purpose is to offer strategic coaching questions. My purpose is to use my expertise in asking questions. That's the only expertise that I get to use in this relationship. And it's the quality of the questions that matter here. I don't ask questions for the sake of it. I ask questions because I've been present, because I'm observing, and I know what questions I need to ask as a result. This is what evokes awareness, and it allows the client to reconnect with the wisdom they already have. I'm not the expert. The client is the expert. I'm only the expert at asking questions, at being present, and at trusting the client and what they're capable of. Which leads to the next point, which is the most important. Everything that is done on this client coaching journey is to reach a level of awareness, and that awareness will lead to action. So how do they increase their level of awareness? So they're paying attention to even what they're saying in the conversation. They're realizing there are new things they haven't explored. There are new perspectives that have come to fruition. There are new skills and strengths that they have learned on this journey just by responding to questions. These are things that they didn't know they had, but this is what they're going to use in the next phase. So as the passenger and as the coach, I'm simply, again, it seems so simple when you put it in terms of being a passenger, because as a passenger on a plane, and I know nothing about flying, all I can do is ask questions. I can't give any instructions because I know nothing about it. And if we think about that in the coaching relationship, I know nothing about this client's life. Yes, I know they have shared their life with me, but I don't know what's within them. I don't know what's possible. All I can do is ask questions for them to bring out those possibilities, new perspectives, that awareness, that wisdom for themselves. So as a passenger, I ask questions that will expand their view. I make comments to acknowledge the client's or the pilot's strengths, their insights, and their unique ways of navigating the journey. And as we do this, and as we grow in awareness, this leads to the keyword grow there, is growth. This is, let's say, towards the end of the relationship, right? Or the end of the coaching session, what you see here. As the pilot or the client lands the plane, so to speak, they will have greater clarity, confidence, and ownership of where they've been, where they're going next, and who they're becoming, and the actions they need to take as a result. And as the passenger and as their coach, I am simply acknowledging, I think that's been a key word throughout this presentation, is acknowledging progress at every stage of the journey and supporting whatever comes next by asking questions, getting them to come up with a clear roadmap as to what comes next. Again, without taking control, simply asking questions, because this is all about awareness in motion. And that is fueled by the new learning the client has discovered about themselves and about what they want to achieve. So as a recap, the Takeoff Framework is more than a process. This is a philosophy. This reflects my belief that coaching is about returning to self-trust, to clarity, to confidence, and to alignment. And if there's one thing here that I didn't really include in the metaphor, it's the plane itself. The plane itself represents, you can say, the client's life, or the client's journey, right? The pilot knows what they're doing. I don't know. The client or the client is the pilot of their own life. Let me say that again. The client is the pilot of their own life. They have full autonomy. They choose the destination, they make the decisions, and they're the one that leads the direction towards their own progress. You know, as coaches, we might ask a question like, oh, where do you feel you're at now at this stage? You know, that's just checking in. But in no way do we say or even suggest or hint what direction the conversation should go in. Otherwise, that's a big X problem, right? So as the coach, as the passenger, I'm supporting the client's journey through presence, through partnership, and through perspective. I'm a trusted companion who only asks questions, who reflects insights and supports learning as the client steers the path themselves. Okay. The last part of my presentation is simply looking at coaching as a flight, looking at the journey itself. So we focused on the relationship between the pilot and the passenger. So now I will just pivot slightly for us to talk about the journey. So on this journey, I don't know, Christina, would you like me to specify the competencies that align, or I can just, okay, I don't need to do that. Okay.
It's up to you. It's
Okay.
the image is really speaks to us. So just share what you feel it is important to share.
Okay. All right. So at the beginning, there's always the stage where you book your ticket before you get on any flight, before you go anywhere, right? So this is where you begin the partnership. This is where you partner with your client to define the coaching relationship. You might even think of this as, you know, the discovery call before it actually begins. Okay, because you're clarifying your expectations, the responsibilities between what I just shared in the previous half of the presentation. That's what you're doing. You're explaining the relationship and the roles between the client and the coach. Next is when you're checking in. So now the coaching relationship has officially begun. And now, as the coach, I'm actively listening, I'm present, I'm understanding where they are now and how it connects with what they want, which leads to the next step. We know you cannot start without being clear as to what specifically do you want as an outcome from this session. And that's why mapping goals is so important. Okay, these are always going to be linked to the client's values, their beliefs, and their identity. So then when you have your goals checked, then we can look at the security checkpoint, which is what's stopping you from getting there? What are the limiting beliefs? What assumptions have you made about where you're hoping to go that is blocking you or that are blocking you from getting there? What emotional blocks, what decisions, what mindset do you already have about the goal that you hope to achieve? And that's the reason why you're not getting there. So that's what we look at the security check. Then now we're at the stage where we can finally take off. So when you're taking off, you've moved past those limiting beliefs and you can expand to start thinking about new ways of thinking, new perspectives. Because let's just say, you know, when you're grounded, all you can see is what you know. But as you take off, you can start to see new things, have a new perspective, a bird's eye view, and you can look at the situation completely differently. Then the next is we're looking at cruising altitude. Now, from this perspective, they're gaining more awareness. They're like, okay, I see things differently now. Now, how can I explore this new perspective? And that's where asking questions in response to what the client says is extremely important here because they're at a new level. And at this new level, if they're not careful, they could retreat. We don't want them to retreat. They don't want to retreat. We want to ask questions that will lead them towards their goal in response to the things they're saying. Okay, from cruising altitude, then they might start to have some thoughts and fears come up regarding where they're going, right? And so this is where it's about challenging any emotional processing and resistance to the goal, especially resistance to the transformation that's required of them as a person in order to achieve that goal. Because we all know we like comfort as humans. We would rather stay where we are because exploring something new requires a bit of discomfort, and that's what turbulence is all about. So as we're in that turbulence, then we're making some adjustments, nothing drastic, but asking questions so the client can realize, you know what, I can do this. I only need to make some small changes here and there, but I'm still in control and I can still do this for myself. They're now more aware of the skills they have that will help them to achieve that goal. Now, when we're looking at rerouting, this is all about using that new learning, adjusting their goals, making any slight changes before we get towards the landing. These are changes towards their thinking, their mindset, any changes that might have to shift their values a bit, or their values remain the same and they might have to change their mindset to align with those values. Whatever it is, whatever comes up that is relevant at that point, that needs to change in order for them to land and hit those goals or start working towards those goals. And lastly, landing is the end, not the end for the client, but the end of that conversation or that session. This is where their action steps are made. This is where there are accountability structures put in place and systems to support sustainability even after the session ends, because we know that it's between sessions or even after the whole coaching journey has ended that the client will continue to implement the changes, the new awareness, the mindsets that have come up as a result of the coaching relationship. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you for reminding us of our roles, of the greatness of the client. And thank you for doing that in such an impactful way through images. So, yeah, it's
Thank
been a
you.
journey, this presentation. It's been a wonderful journey, traveling, flying, and going through the different corners of the coaching mindset. So it's also nice, I always ask to coaches who present their model or framework, what was the gift that you received? I mean, you went a very long way since the beginning of the training, and this is shown by your work. So what was the gift that you received by working at this project?
I really appreciated how simply I can explain the coaching relationship. I think in the beginning, trying to find the right words. I think when I first started, I used some kind of metaphor at a restaurant, but it didn't quite fit with the coaching definition. But I think now this is the simplest image. I think almost anyone can imagine this image. And even with the explanations, they're so simple that I think I could use it, when starting any kind of coaching relationship with anyone. I can take them through this framework, and it will clearly explain the roles of the client and the coach. So to me, the gift is the simplicity of being able to explain this relationship so simply.
So true. Simplicity is one of the competences, one of the ability in coaching and professional and master coaching. So I really can say that you express that fully. So thank you so much, Lydia. We'll stop the recording and then we will continue our conversation on what this work brought us to our awareness as coaches today. Thank you so much.